boys, he was thought of more by the king, the one who had all command and authority in this kingdom. Then the presidents and the princes sought to find an occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we should not find any occasion against Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of God. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. So they're coming to the king, they're flattering the king. And all the presidents of the kingdom and the governors and the princes of counselors and the captains and have consulted together to establish a royal statute. We're going to make a new law to make a firm decree that whosoever shall petition of any god or man for 30 days, save thee, O king, shall be cast in the den of lions. Okay, let's go ahead and stop there. Mike, have you got it working? Just go audio. Because if I get too far ahead of myself, I got to back up and it may not make too much sense. So what's happened here? Darius has taken control of the Babylonian Empire. It is now the empire of the Medes and Persians. Most people don't understand what this means or the importance of it, but the Medes and Persians had a particular thing about them. If a Mede or a Persian king made a law, you might as well take it to the bank. That law could not be changed, not even by the king himself. If the king said, tomorrow you can only walk 3 steps for 4 hours, and the king got out of bed, I don't care if the toilet was 5 steps away, homeboy can only take 3 steps. Not even himself could change that law unless he's been found guilty. It was Cyrus, later on we would learn, who would return the Jews from captivity to their native country. But see, Daniel's story here in chapter 6 picks up under Darius' rule. What we want to go through this morning, the reason why I'm preaching on this is y'all know I work a full-time job, and I do most of my job is sales. A lot of it is a firefighter to put out fires that other people create, but most of it is titled sales. So I talk to a lot of people throughout the week. And a lot of people have the same interest we do in wanting to serve God, but don't have the ability to. So I ran across this. He's a friend of mine, actually. He's a real good guy. We got to talking. And he says, hey, you still doing that preaching thing down there in Fort Pierce? I said, yeah. I said, we ain't missed a service yet. Oh, you haven't? I said, no. Oh, that's dangerous. You should listen to the government. I said, why? I said, we have. We've followed every rule and every regulation, everything that we're supposed to do. Oh, but you're not supposed to go to church. I said, it don't say that anywhere. I said, what did Daniel do when King Darius made a decree against him worshiping God? What did Daniel do? Did he go and say, well, Lord, it's just too much for me to get up on any other normal Sunday, but now that you've come up with an excuse for me, I guess I can follow it. Did Daniel do that? What did Daniel do? Let's keep going. Because remember, Daniel was excellent in spirit. After Darius took over, he appointed 120 princes, or if we want to relate it into today's terms, 120 governors. So there was 120 governors, or lordship, or however you want to relate it. There was 120 rulers that Darius appointed over his kingdom. This is a large kingdom. Over these princes, or governors, were 3 presidents. This gave Daniel an extraordinary influence. This gave Daniel, or put Daniel, for anybody that was wanting to go against him, under the microscope. Does this sound kind of familiar now? Every Sunday morning when you pull out your driveway to go to church services, do you see the blinds shake just a little bit because somebody's watching you? is a neighbor out there acting like he's picking up the newspaper just to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. See, but like many people, when we try to become when we're trying to follow the life of an obedient child of God, they're dissatisfied with the fact that we're doing such. You see, the princes didn't like, or the governors didn't like the arrangement that Daniel had. We don't have their motives in detail. Nevertheless, they sought to remove Daniel from power. So they're looking for an occasion against him, but they could not find one. Daniel was an altogether good and honest man. The governors got together and they came up with a plan. You see, this ought to be flattery for Daniel, because what was the only thing they knew they could catch Daniel to do, that they could catch him in a trap? You see, Daniel worshiped God. Daniel was an obedient child of God. Daniel didn't let anything stand between him and services on Wednesday night. Daniel didn't let anything stand between him and Sunday morning services on Sunday morning or evening. I know a lot of those in the world say, oh, that's too much worshiping. That's too much God for me in one week. For Daniel, this was not enough. So what did they do? They went to the king. Oh, king. They petted his mane. They flattered his ego. They did everything they could to get him to pass a law. And the king says, you know what? I am an important dude. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, let's pass this law. Anybody that worships anybody else but me for 30 days or gives a salutation or anything besides me for 30 days, yes, we will throw them into the lion's den. The king never in any thought anything about Daniel. He didn't consider this. He loved Daniel, thought the world of Daniel, knew that Daniel was a righteous man and an obedient child of God. But it never entered into the king's mind what these people were trying to do. They will have the king pass a law, and whoever petitions anyone, God or man, for 30 days, except the king, shall be cast into the lion's den. The king, not knowing what they were up to, signs a law. No doubt his ego was pretty lifted up by the gesture of the governors as well. After all, they all came together. Not just one or two. It says they all. They all came together. So you imagine, you're the king, you're sitting there on your throne. The next thing you know, you hear, hey king, and 120 of your princes or governors show up to all make over you. I don't care who you are. You're going to be kind of impressed with the turnout, aren't you not? We're impressed when we see more than 10 or 20 here at the services that serve the Lord on a Sunday morning. Much less the king having 120 of his princes show up to worship him. You kind of getting the picture? Now, Daniel saw that the law had passed. But what did Daniel do? Daniel went home and opened his windows. He prayed to God, as was his custom. You see, there are some lessons that we can learn by Daniel. Dealing wisely in our business affairs will bring us in a position of influence, just as Daniel was. Proverbs 22 and 29 says, seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men. Daniel's honesty and integrity kept him out of trouble. In Proverbs chapter 11 and 3, the integrity of the upright shall guide them, but the perseverance of the transgressors, if I could speak this morning, shall destroy them. Listening to those who flatter our egos blinds us to their true purpose. This is what happened to King Darius. You see, King Darius was in there. They were all flattering his ego, telling him how great of a king. Oh, king, live forever. You're the greatest thing that's ever been. But Proverbs 26:28 says, a lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it, and a flattering mouth worketh ruin. Something cannot be compromised. Prayer is one of them. You see, for us, prayer as a child of God is a command. 1 Thessalonians 5:17 says, pray without ceasing. However, God's people desire to pray. If we were a child of God, we desire to go into communication with God. We desire to go into prayer with God. Psalms 55:17 says, evening and morning, and at noon will I pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. But if you look further on in Daniel chapter 6, verses 11 to 17, we see that there was a plan brought together by these governors or these princes. And it says, and these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. So what did they do? They sat in the driveway. They peeled back those curtains to see if Daniel was a true man of God. They sat in the church building parking lot and wouldn't come in because they knew that if they heard the scripture and the gospel preached, they may have to do something about their soul. They sat at home, waiting on the tithes to get right so they could go to the church of nature. They sat at home and said, oh, well, you know, it's just too hard for me to get out on any other Sunday. I can sit here and I can turn on TV and I can feel just as good about myself as if I were sitting in a pew. That's what these men did. They were watching Daniel, just waiting for him to slip up, or waiting for him to be consistent because they knew that he was a child of God. Verse 12, they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree, and said, hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or any man within 30 days, save thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians. Now listen, which altereth not. Then answered they and said before the king that Daniel, which is the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth thee not, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till going down of the sun to deliver him. They saw Daniel praying, as was his custom. They confirmed the law. They reported this to the king. The king, with a heavy heart, was displeased with himself because he knew he made a law against his friend. The king sought to have Daniel delivered, but the law of the Medes and Persians, however, could not be reversed, not even by the king. Therefore, we see, and we know this story as Daniel in the lion's den. We see Daniel traveling towards the lion's den under captivity. The king professed his confidence that God would deliver Daniel. And a stone was brought and sealed over the lion's den, or the lion with the king's seal, over the lion's den with the king's seal. Verse 16, and the king commanded that they brought Daniel, and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, listen to what this king says. Understand the influence that the life of Daniel had upon this king. Listen. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God, whom thou servest continually. It didn't say will. It didn't say if. It says, he will deliver thee. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose may not be changed concerning Daniel. The king, the ruler of the land, was so influenced by the life of this man and the consistency of his worship that he was assured himself that Daniel would be delivered. We're going to leave off in verse 17. The wicked are always seeking to catch the righteous in violation of something. Psalm 37:32 says, "The wicked watcheth the righteous, and seeketh to slay him." Psalms 35:21 tells us, "Yea, they opened their mouth wide against me, and said, Aha, aha, our eye seeth it." You see, folks, if we decide to stay home on Sunday morning, Sunday night, or Wednesday night, we ought to take into consideration who is watching us. Daniel, in his life, knew who he was. He knew that he was going to be a faithful child of God. Nothing was going to stand in the way of him. Not the king's decree, not 120 honorary governors, nothing. He was going to worship God and worship God alone. Proverbs 16:20 says, "He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whosoever trusteth in the Lord, happy is he." You see, folks, as children of God, no matter what happens, the word of the Lord will not be stopped. We must trust in God even in the most desperate of times. Now, in verse 18 through 23, we see the king's anticipation. Let's go back to the scriptures. "Then the king went into his palace and passed the night fasting. The king is so upset he didn't eat. He didn't do anything. Neither were instruments of music brought before him. And his sleep went from him. The king arose very early in the morning and went in haste into the den of lions." The king had been thinking about Daniel all night long. "And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said unto Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions?" Then Daniel said unto the king, "O king, live forever. My God hath sent an angel, and hath shut the lion's mouth. They have not hurt me, for as much as before him innocency and was found in me. And also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt." Then the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take up Daniel out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in God. Daniel called out, "O king, live forever." Daniel said that God has sent an angel and has shut the mouth of lions. Daniel pronounces his innocence and tells the king that he has done nothing to hurt him. The king commanded Daniel be brought out of the lion's den, and they inspected this child of God. Daniel had not been hurt in any way. See, society likes to laugh at the problems of others. Proverbs 24:17 through 18 says, "Rejoice not when thine enemy falleth, and let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth, lest the Lord see it, and it displeases him, and he turn his wrath from thee." Fulfillment of hope brings great joy. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick, but when the desire cometh, it is a tree of life. Proverbs 13:23. But what happens now? Daniel, being a true servant of God, was convicted, tried, found guilty, thrown into the lion's den. The king's dear friend. The king rises up early in the morning to go check on Daniel. "Daniel, where are you? Are you all right? Have the lions eaten you?" Daniel cries out, "O king, I have done thee no harm. Live forever." He immediately tells the guards, "Open the stone, break the seal," because, see, the law of the Medes and Persians had now been fulfilled. Daniel did go in the lion's den. Daniel comes out, not a scratch on him. Not even probably any lion hair was hanging on him. He was just sitting there hanging out and chilling with the lions. God had taken care of Daniel. Why? Because Daniel believed in God. What's the next emotion the king finds? Anger. because now the king knows that those whom he entrusted in had mocked him and tricked him into betraying his friend. Those who plotted against Daniel also made a mockery and a fool of the king. He took them and cast them in the lion's den with their families. This demonstrated the king's wrath against those who would manipulate the system for their own purposes. Amen? This is those that, I don't need to go. It's just too dangerous out there. I don't have the faith in the Lord to be able to muster up enough strength to be able to get to services. Right now it's raining a little too hard. The roads are wet. I might die on the way to services. Let me ask you a question. In which state of mind would you rather die? Being obedient or being lazy? The king decreed that men tremble before Daniel's God. The king states, "This is the living God. This is the God whose kingdom shall never be destroyed. This is the God who delivers and rescues those who are obedient to him. This is the God who works signs and wonders." And the king commanded that be brought these men that had accused Daniel, and they cast him into the lion's den, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions had mastery of them, and brake their bones into pieces, wherever they came at the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote unto all the people, nations, and languages that dwelleth in the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree. This is the same thing the king did when he made a law about anybody saluting or coming to anybody else besides the king for 30 days. But if you notice, there's no end on this law. There's no cap. I make a decree that every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever. And his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. You see, folks, we never know the bigger plan that God has for us. We may not understand why that, we got to go to Sunday morning services, Bible study. We have to go partake of the Lord's Supper every first day of the week. We may not see the bigger picture. But let me guarantee you one thing. There are those that are watching to see what you do. And the impact that you may have in their life. This is where Chris's lesson was great this morning. The impact that you may have in their lives, you may not have any idea. We had a brother in here this morning that was talking about how when he was converted from Catholicism to the Church of Christ, how somebody was able to give him book, chapter, and verse because they had studied. You see, they had done what Daniel did. They had put the work in. They had memorized the verses. They cared enough about their God that they knew that one day they'd be able to teach the gospel to those that knew it not. Now I have a dear friend and brother because of him. And because of that, we have all those who are here this morning. So I want to warn you, before you think twice about leaving the keys on the coffee table, before you think twice about just turning the boob tube on just to make sure you can watch some holy roller preacher tell lies to you, think about the influence you have around others. Because you never know what your life is going to do for somebody else. In this kingdom, everyone was commanded to worship the living God because of one man. There are those who need to respond to the invitation. The Bible says in 1 Peter 3:21, the like figure wherein the baptism doth also now save us. Not the putting away the filth of the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience towards God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In Acts, we see where Saul disobeyed what denominationalism tells us we have to do. He prayed, he fasted, he did everything he could do in the world to save himself. But what did Ananias tell him to do? Arise and be baptized. Wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. Hymn number 490.